being intentional about how you bring in different members of the team, what they're going to be focused on, understanding what you're really good at and what's driving the most valuable that you do for the company is so important. You got to enjoy yourself along the way. And so if you're not enjoying yourself, it's time to take a step back and ask yourself why.
Thanks for joining us on the Better Business, Better Life podcast. I'm your host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs lead their ideal lives by creating better businesses because life is just too bloody short. I'm a certified EOS implementer, an FBA-accredited family business advisor, and a business owner myself with several business interests. I work with established business owners and their leadership teams to help them live their ideal life using EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I use this podcast to share practical tips and tools about how to use EOS in your business and your life to get more of what you want. Today's guest has built a franchise, a juice franchise with over 100 stores around the US using traction and has successfully sold it. He was the integrator in the business and his wife was the visionary. He's now an EOS implementer and is working with other entrepreneurs to improve their businesses. And today he's going to share with you about the book that saved his marriage and his top tips for building a business that is saleable. Please welcome to the show Landon Eckles, who is an EOS implementer with EOS Worldwide. So welcome to the show, Landon. Lovely to have you here.
Thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here and I'm really excited for the episode.
Yeah, so am I. We had a brief chat before we came online. And you told me your story, and it's a really interesting story. I wonder if you could share that with the listeners, please.
Sure. Yeah. So my wife and I founded a juice bar company here in the States called Clean Juice. And we got the idea in 2014. I was actually before that traveling a lot internationally, and it was a great job, but tough on me because I was trying to raise a young family at the time. So we always been very entrepreneurial spirited and wanted to open our own thing. So we spent about a year developing the concept and we opened Clean Juice in 2015. And we were serving organic juices and smoothies and acai bowls and just really healthy, great tasting products. And when we opened, it opened with pretty big success, that first location. And so we knew we wanted to scale it. And so we opened another location down in the southern end of the city that we were in. And then we opened 2 more stores from there. And this happened in about a 2-year period of time. And throughout that, people were like, hey, this is amazing. Do you guys franchise or would you consider franchising? And honestly, neither one of us had ever franchised anything before. It had no background in it, but kept getting the demand. So we figured we'd look into it. And so we thought it would be a good opportunity for us to scale the business and help people kind of open their own clean juices in their local markets. So we did. And fast forward from when we opened 5 years later, we had 100 stores open across the country in 2020. And then, of course, COVID happened. So it was definitely a wild ride. We scaled it very quickly, but it was a really cool product and there was high demand for it. So it was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Mm. And of course, you've got 5 children, is that right?
I do. Yeah. So 5 kids.
So you were doing all of that while also being married and having a young family and raising kids, yeah?
Yeah. And my wife was as well. So if your listeners are familiar with EOS and how it works, she was our visionary and I was our integrator. So we actually worked hand in hand and we were the VI duo. So yeah, so it was both of us.
Yeah. Okay. You obviously have a lot of, you're obviously very good together. I mean, it's always very challenging to work with your wife or husband in a business, but obviously there was a great synergy there. So yes, the visionary integrator relationship. So you weren't always running on EOS though in the business, were you?
That's right. So I always tell Mark Winters, the co-author of Rocket Fuel, that book saved our marriage, right? Because we were both kind of leading the company as co-founders, but we were falling all over each other, right? Neither one of us, the team didn't really know who they reported to and who's doing what. And it was just very, I call it a bowl of spaghetti, right? It was just very kind of all over the place. And so it wasn't until we read Traction and then Rocket Fuel that we got really clear on what she was good at and what she loved to do that could add value to the company. And then what I was good at and loved to do and add value to the company. So she became our visionary, focused on the future, focused on, the R&D and the menu and how are we going to service the guests and what's the culture of the brand, all of that stuff. And I was thinking about, okay, how do I make it happen today? Right. How do I work with the leadership team? How do I make sure that we're digging into the details when we need to, making sure that everyone understands kind of what's the focus today. She'd bring those 20 ideas to every meeting, and I would tell her that 19 of them were insane, but one of them was great. And so we would go for that one. And it wasn't until we actually read that book that we were super clear on really, what it is that we could do to add value to the company while also doing the stuff that we were great at and loved to. So it was super helpful.
It actually reminds me, I had a client who was running a metal recycling firm, husband and wife team as well. And they came in to do EOS with me, and we kind of went through the whole the accountability chart, looked at the visionary versus the integrator, and then they gave them the rocket fuel book, and they said exactly the same thing. They said this book actually saved our marriage, because we loved each other, we loved working together, we were just always at odds and always, confusing everybody else around us in terms of what we're trying to do. And it was the other way around. He was the vision, she was the integrator. But just by defining those roles, it actually meant that when they got into a tussle or an argument, which is perfectly okay, right? There should be natural tension between a visionary and integrator, but they can actually go, rather than saying, oh, Stu, you're just being Stu. It's like, oh, Stu, you're being a visionary, or, oh, Lisa, you're being an integrator. And so it gave them that kind of language to take all the heat out of those emotions, which I think was really interesting. So yeah, I completely understand rocket fuel. For those of you who don't know, the rocket fuel talks about the fact there are two types of entrepreneurs required to run a business. And I suppose for a lot of people, we often think we can either be that one person who can do both, or you've got two co-founders who are trying to both be co-founders without any definition of, what they should really be doing. So that's a great book to have a read of.
Exactly.
So, as I said, you weren't running EOS, but you came across the book Traction. Tell us a little bit about how you came across that and what that did for you.
Yeah. So I was in something called Vistage, which is a peer-to-peer kind of CEO coaching group, and working with other CEOs of other companies in this Vistage format. And it was great. I thought it was great for me, right? We happen to have an EOS implementer in the group as well, who was building his practice, and I'll get to that in a moment. But Vistage was awesome for my own personal development and my coaching. But I always found that I would learn something in Vistage, and then I would try to bring it into my business with my leadership team. And they always knew when I had my Vistage meeting, because for about a week after, we'd be doing something. And then it would kind of fizzle out, right? And so I'd go and learn something, and, a month later, and then we would do that. So I felt like Vistage was great for me, but I really needed something for my team, something for us to really align around. And so kind of at the same time, we had experienced really rapid growth. We were dealing with COVID and just all these different issues in the business. So I finally read the book, Traction, and I was like, wow, like this, I think this would help us tremendously. So I devoured the book in like 2 days. I called the implementer who was in my Vistage group. His name was Neil. And we booked a 90-minute meeting, and, the rest is history. So we worked together for 3 or 4 years and implemented, EOS into my company with an implementer, right? So I was also confused, integrator, right? And implementer. So I was the company's integrator, meaning I was running the day-to-day operations of the business. Neil was teaching me how to run EOS into my business, and he was helping to facilitate those all-day sessions with our leadership as our EOS implementer. So I hired him to help me with that, and it was awesome. I mean, it really helped us. Like I always say that EOS doesn't, it doesn't magically solve all of your problems. It just gets really clear as to what's actually important, because before EOS, you feel like you've got 150 arrows in your brain pointing in all these different directions. After you do EOS, you know what the top 3 to 7 most important things you got to focus are. And so it just created that clarity for us, which was amazing. And so eventually I sold that company, and I loved EOS so much that I decided to become an EOS implementer myself. And so I've been doing it now for just about a year as an actual EOS implementer, which has been a really, really cool experience.
I can relate to that. 5.5 years I've been doing it for now, and I absolutely adore it. Hey, so tell me, when you first read the Traction book, what was it? Was there one thing in there that kind of stood out for you that made you go, oh my goodness, this has been missing my entire life? Because I certainly had that moment myself.
So it wasn't one thing in particular. I had done a little bit of everything, right? And so I was trying to run a weekly meeting with my management team, and it was 4 hours, and we just went round and round talking about the same stuff, right? So I tried to do that. And then we tried to set quarterly priorities, right? We talk about them in the beginning of the quarter, wouldn't talk about them again until the end of the quarter, right? And nothing ever got done. And so, and I had a company org chart, right? Like my leadership team would like literally make fun of me. They'd be like, you're always working on this org chart thing. But it was just names and titles, right? So it was so interesting. I read Traction, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is like what I've been spending all this time trying to figure out. It's all right here, right? Just way better than I could have done it. And so I'm a big component. Like if you are trying to do something and it's not working, like somebody's figured it out. You just got to go and find that thing. And so I was super stoked when I read Traction because it showed me the light on all the issues that I was having and trying to like reinvent the wheel. And it was just super clear. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's how you actually get a priority done in 90 days. You check on it every week. And so I just kept having all these little light bulb moments. And I was like, this would be so helpful. And I was looking for something that my leadership team could really rally around and feel like they all brought the accountability into the room versus me trying to push something down throughout the organization. So it was a mixture of all that.
I had a similar experience. I was actually running a business at the time, and a lot of the things that I was doing, like we had a scorecard. It was just a whiteboard rather than an actual, electronic scorecard. But we had a whiteboard that we were tracking things on a weekly basis, and we are trying to run weekly meetings. But yeah, it was just a bit chaotic. And I'd been doing coaching for about 20 years as well, and I had been doing, lots of little bits and pieces based on what I had learned from running some quite large businesses. But I didn't actually have a framework that just tied it all together. And I saw Traction and went, oh my goodness, this is it. This is my framework. This makes it easy.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. So
okay, so we've talked a little bit about the Rocket Fuel book and obviously the impact that had for you and your wife, which is fantastic. And it's really great to hear that you were very clear about what roles each of you had. Is there another tool that was like really transformational in the juice business?
as it relates to EOS or in general?
No, as it relates to EOS, was there an EOS tool particularly that you kind of went, oh my goodness, that was the game changer? I know that we've got the foundational tools. Obviously, those 5 things together work really, really well. But was there anything that really stood out and sort of said, when once we did that, this completely changed?
Yeah, I think, for me, it was definitely like the level 10 meetings, right? And obviously that's a foundational tool, but I was trying so hard to have these weekly leadership team meetings and we would schedule them for 2 hours. They'd always go over because we never really solved issues. We just talked about them. Like we did the discuss, right? It was discussion after discussion. And it was just like, so within the level 10, as you know, we IDS or work through issues, right? We would talk about our issues before, never really solved them. So the tool that I think was probably the most transformational for us was the issue solving track, right? Really making sure that we were identifying our issue, not talking about just the symptoms up here, but digging down and really finding out why is this an issue? What is the issue? And how is it impacting the business? We didn't have the tools to ask those questions, right? We didn't really know. We would just say statements about the issue and that was it, right? We give a little history and a little analogy, right? And so we weren't asking ourselves the right questions. So, identifying the issue and then discussing it briefly, right? Not repeating ourselves, not politicking, actually getting clear on what healthy discussion looks like. So that was super helpful. And I think the real light bulb moment with IDS is the solve, right? Every issue has some kind of solve, which creates an action. And so for me, I was like, oh my gosh, like it just compartmentalized everything for me. And it just made so much sense. And so we went from going round and round and round about issues to actually working them, discovering really what they were, asking ourselves questions, discussing when we needed to, and then solving them with action. And so that was an absolute game changer for us. And as you know, that happens in that weekly level 10 meeting. Our meetings went from 3 hours to 90 minutes, and they were half as long and at least 10 times more impactful.
I think that Gino in his Explainer video talks about that. He talks about having a time management tool and saving you time. So you still, you have regular meetings, but you're actually having short, sharp, really effective meetings. And I love the IDS. You're absolutely right. It's really a chance, if it's done well, to really dig deep and find out what, because obviously there's the issue that is often brought up is very surface level. And it's only when you start digging to get to the real issue and ask those tough questions, that you get the real kind of root cause of it. And I think one of the things I'm learning a lot with a lot of my clients, they feel like they have to kind of run through the meeting and tick off all their issues on their issues list. But it's not a game. It's not a race to get to the ticking them off. It's about having those really meaningful conversations. And sometimes the solve may not solve the complete issue, but it's always taking a step forward. And I think that what I love about it is there's always an action point. So you're not just discussing for discussing's sake. You're going, right, even if we can't solve the entire issue, at least we can take one step towards something that might then bring us back to help solve it next time around.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I totally agree. It's magnitude, right? Order of impact on the business. And so I think sometimes teams like they'll bring issues aren't really issues, but they learn in the beginning, or they want to solve like the easy stuff so they can do that ticking, right? But it's like, yeah, exactly. It's a little bit of but it's like, guys, look, like if we solved one issue, but it was the biggest, most important issue that we had to solve, that was a great use of 60 minutes, you know? So it's all about impact. And that's what I try to coach now.
That's beautiful. I actually have in my office, I use some soft, fluffy toys to kind of, remind people of some of the things that they need to do. And I actually have a Donald Trump in my toolkit, which is the no politicking. And it's just a reminder, whether you love him or hate him, it doesn't matter. It's a reminder that that's what politicians do, is they repeat themselves over and over again. That's not what we're about. We're actually about, sharing your opinion once. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. So structured meetings, having that IDS, you're absolutely right. That's a game changer, I think, for most businesses. And it does. I mean, if you think about the number of meetings that we used to have before I brought traction into the business, it's like we would have meetings for just about everything, and they would go for ages, and then you come out and go, what was that about? So it's a definite game changer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Cool.
And
Tell
I
me
love
about
the
the
rating
growth.
too.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I love rating the meetings as well, right? That was always cool because if you don't rate the meeting, you don't know how you're doing, right? Number one. Number two, if you know at the beginning of the meeting that you're going to rate it at the end, it actually helps you to do better work throughout the meeting, right? So it's this psychological thing. And I was like, wow, like our meeting sucked, but I never had a way of explaining it. And now I did with a rating. So they didn't start out as tens, but we got there, you know? So it's just that measurement tool. And it's so funny because it's like such a basic thing, but it just like is so powerful. That's why I love EOS. It's simple and it works. It takes work, right? But if you follow it and you put the work in, it's a simple thing to follow.
Yeah. Actually, I hadn't really thought about that. You're right, because you're coming in with an intention in the meeting that you want to make it the best meeting possible, and you're going to have to rate it. Yeah. I often have the discussion, especially in the early days with new clients, about the ratings. Yeah, they tend to do it based on, oh, I didn't like the meeting, therefore I gave it a 6. It's like, no, you know what? Every meeting is actually perfect before it starts, isn't it? Because nothing has gone wrong before it starts. So every meeting is a 10 before it starts. And then it's really about, did we follow the process? Did we actually get into the real issues? Did we do everything that's required in that meeting? And then you kind of take points off where perhaps you haven't followed the process, or somebody was late, or whatever it might be, and then you get a real score. And then it forces you to think about, well, what do we need to do to improve that? And there's no more joy for an EOS implementer when we get our stuff come through from 90 or from Stretty and see that your clients have actually rated the meeting tens across the board. You go, yes, we made it.
Totally. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
brilliant.
Totally great.
So tell us a little bit about the growing pains, because I mean that's huge growth that you had with the juice bar, to go from what was essentially, you and your wife kind of running a business, opening up a couple of stores, to suddenly 105 stores across the whole of the US. What were some of the challenges that you faced in that growth? Because that's pretty fast growth.
It was fast growth for sure. I think, the biggest challenge that we faced early on was COVID, right? But everyone faced that. But for us, we're in the restaurant industry. So actually kept most of our stores open during that time because we were considered essential. But just taking that, I think in March it was like 80% revenue hit. And then, April was 50% revenue hit, and May it got better. But then after that, it was such a swing. Like it was a pendulum swing in the right direction for us. Like our demand went up crazy. So that was great, That created its own set of challenges. And those challenges were supply chain, really, because we were sourcing only USDA certified organic materials to make all of our products. So not only did we scale to 100 locations in 5 years, we were the first to market a certified organic concept in the US that was franchised. So it was like we were doing all these first, which of course just created more and more challenges and difficulty. So, as we scaled, we tried to make decisions that were, going to be the best for the brand, just in terms of where we were sourcing and how we would make different products and different things like that. And, as you get bigger and bigger, you just can't please everyone, right? So there's always trying to work through, work with different franchisees and different partners on different things. And so that was definitely a bit of a challenge. But before EOS, we had no way of prioritizing all this stuff, and then after I implemented it, it was just very clear what we needed to focus on. So it didn't make the challenges go away. It just made our team way better at handling them, which is, I think, every business. No business runs perfectly, right? That's just a complete misnomer, right? That's not what we help entrepreneurs do. What we do help them do is get more organized, more clear, and eventually give them more time back because they focus less on all this stuff in their brain and they're able to compartmentalize it along the way. So we went through a bit of that, but But yeah, those were the big challenges. And I think that, the biggest challenge was probably in supply chain, just because of the demand and then the lack of the materials after the demand went up.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. And it's interesting just thinking about what you just said then. I mean, the one of the things I love about EOS is it actually forces, I should say forces, well, yeah, it does. It forces the leadership team to actually step up and be a real leadership team, right? So often, especially in a newer business, you'll have people who are on the leadership team, but they're not really functioning as leaders of the business. And then when you use the accountability chart to really establish what those main functions are and then get those main functions represented the leadership team, I think it changes the conversations that are had at that level. And I certainly know as an entrepreneur, when you've got your leadership team working with you, you suddenly feel supported. I have so many clients who say, hey, look, I felt like I was doing it all on my own. And now suddenly I've got this team who are actually there with me fighting for the greater good. We're all in it together and they feel like they're equals and they can actually contribute. You find that within your business?
100%. Before EOS, I felt like I was just trying to push things down. And I always love to use these different analogies, but I felt like I was always trying to push things down. And, rather than I was trying to push down the responsibility versus, if you think about that from a top down approach, right? The opposite of that would be everyone coming into a circle together, right? And bringing that accountability and that middle of the table together. That's what EOS does, right? It helps the leadership team to understand how important their roles are in the organization, right? And that they have a massive impact on how it goes. And so it's just a different way of thinking. And for me, rather than feeling like I was trying to force people to do things or force different things, we were coming up with it together. So that created their a higher sense of ownership for them around those different initiatives. And it was just amazing to watch them kind of take those balls and run with it, right? As kind of their own accountability. And so, one person can only carry so much weight, but if you get a team to carry, you can carry so much more and actually divide the weight way more evenly. So that's how I felt, kind of post doing EOS.
And I think what I've seen is that, even those who sort of self-implement, one of the things that they often kind of fail to understand is that, yes, you can have all the tools, but it is bringing that leadership team on that journey, like having them involved in it, having them involved in the input, it gives them real ownership. And as you roll EOS about the whole organization, every department feels some real sense of ownership because they're actually contributing rather than being told what to do. They understand where they fit in on the accountability chart. They know what their measurables are. They're coming up with rocks that support the overarching kind of company rocks for the quarter as well. And it feels like they've actually got some ownership of achieving that. Whereas often a lot of self-implementers will kind of go, I've written the VTO and when I've shared it with the team and I've told them what they're going to be doing. And, there's nothing that's better than nothing. I always say it's way better than doing nothing. But at the same time, it's bringing people on the journey that is really important. And I've often noticed, founders, and I'm a visionary myself in some respects, that it's hard to let go. And so you say, but I've got this plan, I know what I want to do. And you just go, trust the process, because at the end of it, you'll still come out with exactly what it is that you wanted to do. But now you've got the team actually understanding why you're wanting to do that, how they fit into it, what they can contribute towards it. And then suddenly they can really run with it because they own it.
Absolutely. 100%. I think that's really well said. And, on the implementing thing, I think that the only companies that should be doing it are the ones that just can't afford, they just don't have the budget for it, because getting your leadership team in a room, right? And having them feel like they're contributing to not just the priorities for the next 90 days, but the vision of the company. Where are we going, right? There's so much ownership in that. And that ownership it creates better executives, right? Our team would look forward to our quarterly meetings, right? They couldn't wait to step out of the business, right? Work so hard in the business for 90 days, come up for air. And it was just, we couldn't wait for it. Right? We loved our quarterly EOS meetings. So, to that end, just kind of talking about like the expense, I think that there is a disproportionate amount of value, right, that we give versus what we get. And that's actually why EOS implementation with implementers works, right? And how I say that is because, and why I say that is because, right, we're paid a certain amount. And so if you look at that amount in a nutshell, that just kind of is what it is. To a business that's typically doing, multi-million dollars of revenue, it's a very, very small expense. If typically what we're doing is we're helping that client or customer or team go from, where they're at to where they believe that they can go by helping them break through that ceiling, the return on that investment is so high typically, right? And there's been study after study that have shown that. And so EOS works because the financial model works for the business owner and we're giving way more value than we're getting. And that's actually a really good thing. So it helps us talk about what we do because, like, hey, if you can afford this, and it's just a cash thing, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be doing it, right? It's, you're going to get the value 10 to 100 times in return. And that's been shown.
It's a return on investment, not a spend. Absolutely.
Exactly right.
And it's a very good point, actually, because I think you're right. I mean, if you can't afford to do it, then self-implementation is better than doing nothing. But what I've learned, and again, through the 5.5 years of experience, is that when I work with owners, even if they have been self-implementing, because often people will read the book and go, let's give it a try. The biggest thing that they say is that it's really hard to actually be in a meeting, run that meeting, facilitate all the conversations, and still actually wear the hat or two hats that you have in the business and participate as a what do you call it, like a participant. So yeah, if nothing else, it actually frees you up to really play the part that you play, whether that be visionary, integrator, sales and marketing, whatever it might be, but it gives you that opportunity to actually play a part in that rather than trying to juggle all the balls of running the meeting, doing the implementation.
That's exactly right. And I think like that's even on like the higher end of like self-implementation. Like really what I've seen is like they're just grabbing a couple tools. They're like, hey, we're going to do this level 10 thing. Right. And so they jump into these level 10 meetings and they're trying to facilitate something that they've just read in a book and don't really quite understand yet, which again, better than nothing. Right. But, typically they're just using a few tools. If they're actually coming out of the business and doing quarterlies, like good for them. But like to your point, really, really hard to run a meeting and be a participant in that meeting at the same time. It's really, really challenging. Because there's certain stuff that we're thinking about as facilitators that the people who in the room who are participating in the meeting are certainly not thinking about.
Yeah. And I always say, we talk about being a teacher, a facilitator, and a coach. And I think one of the greatest things, I always say I'm the dumb blonde at the front with the marker pen, but what I do get to be is the dumb blonde at the front of the marker with lots of different businesses. And so therefore I am, I'm seeing all these things and we just have I've always been a curious child, and now I just get to be a curious child in the session room in terms of asking the questions. So I don't have the answers, not going to lead you to an answer, but I'm going to ask the questions that really get you thinking, which is really hard to do. Because I run 3 businesses at the moment myself outside of being an EOS implementer. And, you get very blinkered in terms of the way that you view that business unless you're actually pulled out of it. So when we come into our quarterlies, it's a great chance to go, oh yeah, somebody question us about what we're doing. It's a good thing to do.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you've been doing EOS implementation for, you say, about 12 months now. Yeah. How are you loving it?
I love it. I think, for me, it was an amazing transition from what I was doing to what I'm doing now. I know the system really well. I really like working with entrepreneurs and their teams. I have throughout like my career, I've always coached people. I've coached my leadership team. I've coached different people. I've helped people with set up their franchise businesses and done different things like that. So I always knew that I probably could be good at it. And now I really, really enjoy it. So I feel like it's a great kind of career step for me. So I'm loving it.
Sure. Can you, without giving away names and things in any kind of real detail, can you give us a couple of examples of teams that you've worked with and the sort of transformation you've actually seen? Because I know that, you can't expect this thing to work overnight. It certainly doesn't. But I know that you do get to see results. Even within the first few months, you start to see things changing. And usually within, 6 months, there's some real turning of the wheels going. And by the time you get 12 months, it's way better. But can you share a couple of examples of teams that you've been working with and the breakthroughs that they've got?
Yeah. I've got a great example. So one of my first clients, I've been with them for almost a year now. We got started kind of right out of the gate. When we first got started, he was visionary, integrator, sales, finance. He was in every single box, right? And he was literally trying to do it all. And he didn't understand why he couldn't do more than the revenue that he was doing. And so now he is in, I think, 2 boxes instead of 4, right? Still not perfect. What he did was he went and hired an integrator. So he moved into visionary. He's still doing sales because he's really, really good at sales, but he's not having the pressure of leading the leadership team and running the level 10s every single week, not focused on, having to be in charge of overseeing operations, right, as the integrator. And that has just freed up him to do more of what he's good at, which is sell more stuff and to be a good visionary. And so his business has doubled in 12 months where he had hit the ceiling for years. So that's just one example, and it's just, it's an unlock for him. you go from thinking I have to do all these things to, wow, if I just brought in somebody else to do just this part, that would create so much value over here. And so, it's just us kind of showing them, hey, there's your name in 4 boxes, right? That's too much. So what do you think? And we just made it a rock, hire an integrator, and he did. And he's super lucky, found a good one, and it's been going great.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes that's the pivotal role in the business, isn't it? Is if you could, because most founders are generally kind of more visionary bent, and therefore, they struggle. They feel like they have to do it all, but they struggle with that minute kind of detail and managing the team as well as being big picture thinkers. I think what's really important from what you just said there too, though, is that, when we talk about the accountability chart, we talk about boxes. You can wear multiple seats, and sometimes you have to, because a small business, if you are the best salesperson, you may well wear a sales seat, and it may even be at the next level down, not even on the leadership team. I've got one client where he's the visionary, and there's actually a salesperson reporting into a sales and marketing kind of function as a salesperson, which is quite interesting. But, you can wear multiple seats, and that's okay. But if you're trying to do too much, you just will not get the results that you actually need. And so even having that epiphany of, oh my goodness, I'm actually wearing 4 hats, 4 serious hats in this business, means it's holding me back.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was literally trying to do everything except for operations seat. I mean, he was doing every other seat. And so, it's like, I get it. In the beginning, you as founding entrepreneur, you're trying to do everything. Being intentional about how you bring in different members of the team, what they're going to be focused on, right? Understanding what you're really good at and what's driving the most valuable that you do for the company is so important. And, we help them figure that out with kind of the different roles of each function, and really also helping them, fill out the delegate and elevate tool, right? What are they great at? What are they doing that's adding value? And then what are they doing that's probably not? So I just love how all the tools kind of work together, to really support the growth of the business.
It is great. And you're right. I mean, the accountability chart and the delegate and elevate go very, very closely together. I think the accountability chart was a bit of a game changer for me as well. I mean, I thought about structure as a business owner and what do you need, but I think being able to get really, really tight on what each function is and what their roles and responsibilities are. Obviously, that then drives your scorecard and your rocks as well. But it's like, I think that if you do that, we tend to, speaking from experience, we tend to do it based on the people we've got in there and where could I put them and what could they do? Whereas, the EOS model is very much about structure first, people second, and looking to the future. I've got one client who actually did an accountability chart for this next 6 to 12 months, thinking about what they needed. He also did one for 5 years out. And what that enabled him to do was he knew that what his growth was going to be and what he was looking at. And so he went from sort of 14 people to 50 people, moving out in terms of the accountability chart. Now, I'm not certain it stays the same. It changes obviously over time, but it gave him a bit of a sense of, if we grew to that size and these were all the roles that we had, looking at our current people, how many of those hats are they kind of all wearing at the moment? And then what it gave him the ability to do was to say, hey, if I find somebody getting overwhelmed, now I can look at, what they're looking for the future, what they could potentially be doing, what hats they're wearing. Then we can look at the person they can hire using that delegate and elevate tool, make sure we've got the right person coming in to take that away from them. So it's a fun, if you like sort of plotting things out and thinking about the future as a vision, it's a great little tool to be able to go, yay, and this is what it could look like in the future. Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I would say I would do, like, before EOS, I would try to fill out my org chart, right, with people and like, all right, what are they good at? And I'll put them over here, and, what is that person good at? And I'll stick them over there. And so that was not the right way to do it. Right. But that's how most people think about doing it, because they're thinking about people versus function. And so that was a huge light bulb moment for me. It was like, oh, wow, like I've been thinking about this all wrong. Like, what do I need this department to be doing? And then who's the right person to be leading those efforts, right? And so it's a switch, and it's subtle, but it's super important.
It's subtle, but it can also make a fundamental difference to the business quite early on as well. And obviously we talk about both, right seats and right people. So I think one of the key things that I see when I start working with a business in EOS is that they go through that whole exercise of, what's the accountability chart, structure first, people second. And then obviously we teach them the people analyze, and we talk about whether people, have shared the core values and they get and want to have capacity to the role. And it kind of shines a spotlight on the things that are quite obviously missing or not quite right. And often in the beginning, it does mean a bit of turnover, which I think, everybody kind of goes, oh my goodness, we're starting to look at this and kind of realizing we've got people issues here, or we've got structure issues here. And so they have to make changes. So I think in the beginning, it can feel almost like you're doing a bit of a clean out, and it feels awful because you're sort of potentially changing people around, but it's for the greater good of the business in the long term. And after they've actually done that little clean out in the beginning, it's amazing how quickly things turn around when you've got the right people in the right seats doing the right thing.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I always describe EOS as like a big spotlight that you come into the business and it kind of shines on, all the corners and brings everything to light. So it feels really awful at the beginning. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know there's so much wrong. But when you start working through them, then it starts to get some order.
Totally. And I think Gino's even described that, right? It's like we have the light bulb as part of the logo, and people think it's like, oh, you have these light bulb moments, and you do. But really what you're doing is you're shining a light on the organization, right? And you're just getting clear as to, hey, what's going well and what do we got to work on, right? And so we're just creating that clarity. And that's what I love. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, perfect. Hey, look, I'm sure we could chat all day because we're obviously both big EOS fans, both from using it, but also as teaching it as well and being a coach. If you had to give 3 top tips or tools to people listening into this podcast, what would they be? What were those kind of, either light bulb moments for you or things that you thought, wow, that's something you really should do as a starting point? What would you say?
Wow. So I'd say number one, anytime I am struggling with something, I think people think about what am I doing, right? And so they always think about do. That's not what I think about at all. When I'm thinking something's going wrong or there's an issue, I think about what am I thinking, right? Versus what am I doing? So 9 times out of 10, it's an issue between the ears versus what I'm actually doing. So it's a head thing, right? So I'd say that's number one, like think about your thinking patterns versus what you're actually doing, because that's where it starts. Number 2, I would say that promises kept to yourself are the most important promises that you'll ever keep. And so I try to, if I say I'm going to do something, I try to keep those things. And I try to, I think that if we can keep promises to ourselves and really create that discipline, then that just helps us kind of overall be better people, to the world. So that would be number 2. And then I would say number 3 is like, don't take yourself so seriously. I struggled with that a lot, being an integrator and being focused on the details and, all the different challenges and all these things. But if you really take a big step back, right, we're not here very long. So we better enjoy the ride along the way. And, what is super hard or difficult today is probably not going to be there in 12 months. Right. So just enjoy it and, know when to take a step back and really see the forest through the trees. Yeah, those are my top 3.
Thank you. And I think that's the clarity break. I was talking about this with a client actually yesterday. We talked about clarity breaks a while back, and only one of the team had actually been doing this. We revisited them to actually talk about, why they're effective they are. And I think that being able to just take some downtime and really think about what is important and not be caught up in the busyness and the day-to-day stuff is really important. It means that you can, really explore what am I really thinking and what I need to do to actually execute on that. It's, again, a really simple tool. I think this is what I love about EOS. Everything is so simple. It isn't easy. Let's be honest. It's not easy, but it is simple. And it's just those little things. And when you start to put them all together, they just create this momentum that gives you that time to then have some more fun with the business. Because it should be, like, as you said, life's too bloody short. We should be enjoying what we're doing.
Exactly. Keep it simple, have fun, love hard, play hard, right? Work hard. It's great too, but and you got to enjoy yourself along the way. And so if you're not enjoying yourself, it's time to take a step back and ask yourself why, right? So
sure. Yeah, I completely agree. Just a quick last question. So now that the business has been sold, obviously, what is your wife doing these days?
So I always tell this joke. She's doing Pilates. She's doing Pilates, and we've got, 5 kids that she's hanging out with, but she is doing a lot of what we just said, enjoying herself. And, she worked in the business hard for 10 years as a visionary. And so now she's just, working on her own wellness and just hanging out with the kids and just enjoying life that way. So, and supporting her crazy husband. So,
yeah, of course. And actually another question has come to mind. I thought we were going to finish, but I've got another question. I mean, so for some people, they go into a business with the intention to sell it. Some people just go into business because they're passionate about what they do, and then it grows into this beast that they weren't expecting. And actually selling a business is quite tough, right? Because it is something that you have created. What was the lever or the moment that was like, actually, it's time to sell, and what did you go through as you thought about that?
Yeah, I think for us, like the business had gotten pretty big, and there were definitely, I think just different things that, like, we always said, like, hey, we're going to grow to a certain size. And once we feel like, perhaps we're not the right people to be leading it once it gets there, or if we're not having the fun that we want to have, like, we're going to figure out something. And so we knew that at some point we would sell the business, and we never knew really what that would look like, right? Whether it was like to bringing on a different partner or whatever. But we just felt like it was time. And so we had put 10 years into it, and we felt like we had grown it to where we could grow it to based on our own personal capabilities and how much more time we want to dedicate to it. And so, I think that we also, had other things we wanted to do, right? I was like, I really wanted to do more kind of coaching things, and eventually I chose to do that through EOS, but we just, we felt like we had done as much as we could, and we were happy to kind of go from there. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of selling a business. And, you get to enjoy what you did, but then also kind of take your next step in life. So that was how we did it.
Perfect. Okay. Well, congratulations on your next step. I'm loving having you on the team at EOS Worldwide, and hopefully we can have many more years of fun helping other entrepreneurs.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I love listening to it, and I think you do a wonderful job. So I really appreciate it.
That's very kind. Hey, Landon, thank you very much. Hey, look, we're going to put Landon's link in the notes here. So if you want to get in contact with Landon, he'll have all the details on there. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.